There we go. Recording in progress. Okay, good morning, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us for what I know is going to be an extremely informative and fact-filled session. Those of you that have been to our webinars during the pandemic, I think this might be our fourth or our fifth, of where we were covering obviously things like furlough, redundancy and so on, with my very esteemed panel of Claire Steiner and Amina Rue. I'll let them introduce themselves in a while. Just some basic housekeeping for you all before we start. Please could you all mute yourselves and put your cameras off, as much as I would love to see your beautiful faces. We'll get everybody get their cameras back on at the end of the session, and then we can obviously get into debate and you can ask questions and so on. If you'd like any questions or to ask any questions during the session, please just put them on the chat at the bottom. You can see, I'm sure you've all done Zoom meetings before, a chat at the bottom. And then at the end of the session, you can obviously put your hands up. There's a little reaction for you to put your hand up, and then we'll get you to speak. We have also got some questions already pre-submitted. So I do believe that this is going to be a fantastic session.
Goes to resort and the registrar will say, sorry, you cannot legally get married. Where will their solicitor be?
Put yourself on mute, please. Owen, if you could find that person and just put them on mute. Very interesting.
And it's quite interesting, actually.
It sounded very interesting. Yeah. Okay. Let's get cracking. Okay, for those of you that don't know me, I am Barbara. It actually says Basia Kolosinska, that's my Polish name. I'm the managing director from C&M Travel Recruitment. I'm also ITT board director. C&M are 24 years old this week. Happy birthday to us, and I've been in travel industry for almost 30 years. We cover all sectors of the travel industry, and many of our partners are sitting here today as well. Anything from tour ops, OTAs, travel agencies, consortia, TMCs, and so on. And I've got a very experienced team who have got a similar background to me also. We wanted to really host a session as we believe we are now at definitely the next stage. The world is open, as you know, people are traveling, people are recruiting, and we now have a whole new plethora of challenges, recruitment, HR, legal, that we have to deal with. So after a very, very challenging time for us all, the world's open, which is great. And now we are where we were from this time last year, where only a tiny percentage of companies were hiring, to now where over the last 6 months, it has actually gone berserk. I've never known it as busy in all of my time in travel recruitment, due to many reasons, which I'll talk about later. It's not all about me today, which of course brings us a whole lot of new challenges, again, which we'll talk about. Okay, before we kick off, I'd like to introduce Amy and Claire. Please introduce yourselves, and then we can go from there.
Amy, do you want to go first, or me?
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces. My name's Amina Rue. I'm a partner head of employment at Travlaw. For those of you who don't know what Travlaw do, we are a specialist niche firm, and we only act for the travel industry, and we serve all of the travel industry's legal needs. And within that, I basically help employers with all of their employment law needs.
Yes, and good morning, everybody. I'm Claire Steiner. I am an HR and talent specialist. I've been working in HR for 30 years and in travel for over 25. I work with a range of different businesses on a consultancy level across the entire spectrum of the industry and outside of the industry as well. But I'm probably best known for my passion for emerging and young talent. So along with Basia, I sit on the ITT board, but I'm also chair of the Education and Training Committee and co-founder of the ITT Future You initiative, which is all about bringing industry together with graduates and universities. And if that's not enough, I'm also the UK director for the Global Travel and Tourism Partnership, which is a multi-educational business partnership and charity supported by global travel and tourism businesses working across the globe, introducing careers in tourism to future generations, sort of 15 to 19-year-olds in state schools. So that's me.
Thank you so much, ladies. So hopefully you guys in the audience can see we have a real broad background between us all, but we dovetail perfectly well together with a lot of knowledge, professionalism from the ladies, and experience as well. Before we kick off, we'd like to put a little poll out there, really, just to gauge where you are from a recruitment. I think there's a lot of hiring managers, managing directors, HR professionals I can see here that have joined us. Hopefully we can see this. And this poll is to do with recruiting talent. Are you currently, I think I'm going to know the answer, are you currently struggling to recruit? And it's a simple yes or no. Can you all see that? I don't know if you can see the results. Claire and Amy, can you see the results or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, okay. I'm not sure if the audience can, or it's just us as, okay, not a surprise there really. 81% yes, 19% no. I would have been gobsmacked if it was the other way around, which leads us exactly to why we're doing this session today. Thank you very much for participating, guys. 80%, 20%, okay. Okay, let's close that. So let's kick off. Where shall we start with all of this information we've got to give you? The Great Resignation. We've all heard that phrase battered around. What's happening? Why is it happening? And what can we do about it? Where should we start? Claire.
Yeah, so this is this phrase was coined in the States. I've sat on a few with international colleagues about this as well. So the UK is certainly not alone in this. I think the Great Resignation is a term because over the last 24 months, people have been on furlough, people have had time to reflect, some people have moved away and you know, changed the direction in their lives. And as a result of kind of having a rethink about what they want from their lives. So I think that's a large part of it. I do also think another part of it is how they were treated during furlough and during the pandemic. And as things are kicking back off now and they're starting to see how other people were treated, they're then questioning whether or not actually the company they're working for is the right company for them. Now, bearing in mind, it's very subjective. People want different things from different companies. So it's not necessarily hugely critical of companies, but I do think that's a large part of why people are now moving on. And I think certainly from an HR perspective, not just across travel, but across industry, UK and globally, you know, we should be expecting up to 40% of staff to actually be moving on this year. And that's a big number.
It's huge, isn't it? It's huge. And it's that pent up, the sort of pent up of 2 years of people feeling grateful to have a job.
Yeah.
During furlough, they're great. Whereas now they realise there are jobs out there because they can see all of you employers, direct employers recruiting, putting on LinkedIn, us as a recruitment agency also putting vacancies out there, and they feel, right, it's time to go. Remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, they might have been at that stage of they were ready to go.
Oh, ready to go, yeah. Yeah.
So it's that pent up emotion. That's definitely from our perspective. That's what we're finding. Because there's so many opportunities, that's what people are looking to leave. Just not enough talent. Annie, what's your point?
I think that's absolutely correct. What both of you said. I think COVID has accelerated it. We've got to accept that the population of the working world, demographics are changing. They were going to change pre-COVID anyway. Some of the reasons that have been given, in addition to what Claire said, is lack of childcare, that, you know, the childcare is not available, so people have to look for alternative jobs. Health concerns, you know, people during COVID all suffered, or not, as the case may be, or had different concerns, and that's driven people, particularly close to retirement, thinking, well, do you know what? I don't want to be exposed to risk. I'm close to retirement. I'm just going to bring my retirement forward. And I think the key here is the Great Resignation. Yes, COVID was the thing that sort of initiated the start of it, but what's happening now, and every survey that you look at says there is going to be a lot of movement in the next year. There's already a lot of movement, and there's going to be more movement, because now what people are doing is seeing that there are a lot of jobs out there, and they're taking benefit of that. They're capitalizing on better work opportunities elsewhere, whereas they may not necessarily have been, you know, thinking about looking, and they're thinking, do you know what, there are jobs out there are better opportunities. Why shouldn't I capitalize on that rather than wait a few years where those opportunities might not be the case? So there are a lot of different factors, but the net result of it is that there is going to be a lot of movement, and it's what companies and employers do to retain the talent that they've got, and attract future talent.
Yeah, and I just actually wanted to add one thing. I think also people took the opportunity when they weren't working to, if they couldn't get another job, which a lot of people did do, is to actually retrain. Yeah. And a lot of people upskilled. So that might be enable them to come back to the industry with more enhanced skills, or actually retrain to go outside. But I think that's also something we need to be talking about, which is, you know, as we go forward, that's another thing that people are looking for. This, we always knew it was an ongoing development, but I tell you, it's becoming more and more important to people now as well.
And I think just in addition to that point, Claire, the problem the travel industry had is it was on its knees, it was standing still. And so therefore people who have worked in the travel industry, in order to bring an income home for their families, had to look at, you know, jobs outside the travel industry, and their eyes may have been open to something else. So it's about attracting new talent to the travel industry, but also trying to pull back some of that existing talent, and how you go about doing that.
Yeah. We absolutely found, from a consultancy point of view, and with a lot of our clients here, that we lost talent. We know that. We know there's lots of jobs out there. So you'd think, okay, the Great Resignation, surely that means people are going to be staying in the industry, but no, because there's such a huge demand for people, there's not enough of the right people, which you guys all know, and the really good candidates, be it a product manager for a tour operator, a reservations agent for an OTA, or a business travel consultant, because the TMC sector, you can see some TMCs here on the screen, has gone absolutely crazy for the last, I'd say, 2 months, really. Every single TMC is pretty much recruiting again, because some of them cut back so much, and we've lost talent. So as a sector, as an industry, we have to look at ways of looking outside the box, attracting and then retaining the people, which we'll talk about again moving forward. But I totally agree with everything you've both said about that's why the Great Resignation is happening, and I think it will continue to happen. Which moves us nicely, lovely segue, into managing staff returning. Contracts, hybrid working. Who actually knew what that was 2.5 years ago? We all know what that is now, don't we? I'm finding, and my team are finding, that every single candidate expects hybrid working as a given. Most of our business clients, our partners, are now offering hybrid working. Ladies, what's your point of view from a legal and from an HR perspective with the clients that you're working with?
I think on that point, you know, pre-COVID, working from home, if we're honest about it, it was a little bit frowned upon, wasn't it? It was like, well, you know, are they going to be working? How are we going to measure it? This, that, and the other. And now it's the complete reverse, that it's normal. It's part of the working society that we all live in. But I think the thing that some employers have not dealt with is that they will have contracts of employment in place pre-COVID. The whole world has changed. The whole way that we work and where we work from has changed. The hours, all of that. And so what it means is that they're still using this pre-COVID existing contract, and they need to be updated. They need to say, where is the place of work? In addition to that, they need to say, you know, if you're working from home, does that mean you have to be sat at your home address? Or does that mean you can go sit in Starbucks and work from there? You know, are these changes on a permanent basis? Are they on a temporary basis? You know, you've heard some employers say, well, that's fine. If staff are going to work permanently from home, we're going to reduce their salaries. You know, what, if anything, has been said about that? So there's a whole contractual piece that needs to be done in terms of updating. But aside from that, you need to implement some sort of hybrid working policy. So it's a non-contractual documentation, and that just really spells it out, because it's still fairly new. You know, we had it during COVID. It was lockdown, go back to work, lockdown, go back to work. It was up in the air. But if this is going to be a permanent feature, then it needs to be clear and it needs to be transparent.
Yeah, and I think there will be a lot of HR issues arising from this. I think, you know, Amy, you made the point about it being non-contractual. That's really important, because you need to have the flexibility to change this. I think at the moment everybody is used to being at home maybe all the time, or now starting to come back in 2 or 3, and people are pushing back. One, if they're coming, they have a long commute and they're thinking, oh my God, the thought of having to get on a tube or a train or whatever for an hour and a half each way, I don't want to be doing that 5 days a week. And also because there's a costing to that as well. They're saving money on that, and we know that, you know, the train operators are dealing with that as well by reducing their flexi tickets and things, season tickets. But I think also, and if I was a betting person, I do think that as we start to move back to, not that will have been normal again, but to how things, you know, a bit more like it used to be, that actually people will start to remember the benefits of actually being together in person. Now, that's a challenge for all business owners anyway, and any manager. You know the benefits of having your team together and how much easier it is for you to develop your staff, for them to learn from each other, and particularly with new staff. You know, we're going to be talking about bringing new people into this sector. How will they learn as effectively remotely as they do? And some will, some won't, but we need to think about that. And I do think, you know, give it in a few months, maybe a couple of years, we'll start to see more people wanting to come back into the office more often.
And I think that's an important point, that the whole onboarding of staff, if they're working fully remotely from home or hybrid, you know, you have to adapt the way that you do that compared to when they would have been ordinarily in the office. Similarly, so with your reporting and your performance management, and that all needs to be adapted. I think it's worth reminding the audience, though, that at this moment in time, there is no automatic right to work from home. Okay, there's no legal right to do that. And I still get this. Employers say to me, do we have to do it? And the answer is no, not legally, you don't. However, if you don't, or you don't think about it, what's going to happen is that you may lose staff because every other employer is offering it, and you may not be able to recruit staff because you might not attract staff where it's completely on site. So you've got to weigh it all up in the grand scheme of things. But I think, Claire, your guess is right, that I think maybe not this year, but slowly in the next few years, I think it's going to turn back to more office-based, is my guess.
I agree. I don't think it's going to be short term. I think we said this last year. I think it's going to be more mid to long term. And I know a lot of companies that have closed offices totally and have all working from home. We as a business have closed one office, sublet another, and have a regional office down in the Surrey area, of which we go to occasionally. My team prefer the work-life balance of the flexibility. I went into London yesterday to 2 events, and it was absolutely exhausting. It was an hour and a half each way. I was knackered. When we get together, and I know that a lot of people say this, when you get together, the power that has, you can't get that on a WhatsApp conference call or even on a Zoom, because the ideas, especially if it's a creative role in marketing or product or sales, where the buzz of the office it almost drives you. But one thing a lot of people do say is they probably get less done when they are together than when they're working from home. So I think it's having that balance. Totally. Also, the attraction, the training, the onboarding is very, very difficult as well. How to do that, and I do think it will probably switch. Probably 18 months to 2 to 3 years.
But I genuinely don't think we'll ever get back to 5 days in the office again, ever. And interestingly, a lot of, and Amy will have a perspective on this as well, but a lot of people are banding around this 4-day working week. I'm actually, there's a lot of me that I can see some benefits to it, but actually I don't think necessarily it's a good thing, for lots of different reasons, mental health being one of them, actually, because I just think the you know, having to cram a full 4 days does that probably outweighs the additional day, whereas actually you can make life a lot easier that way. But I can see that it might work for some people. So from my perspective, and we said this all the way through, it's about maintaining that flexibility, and it goes back to what Amy was saying about non-contractual policies, and that actually everybody is going to be individual, and you're going to have some people who will absolutely know, I only run in the office 1 or 2 days a week, and others to go, I'm happy with 3 or 4. So it isn't, well, there isn't one size fits all.
No, there isn't. I think the 4-day working week, and also there's the unlimited holiday thing that's coming. I think it's very big in the city with the big corporates. I think the travel industry is going to be a little bit far behind to adopt this kind of kind of changing.
I think it is about we've got the Great Resignation, and it is about the Great Reinvention, isn't it, now for employers, about what can we do to attract and retain staff. The 4-day week, like you, Claire, I think it's got its pros, it's got its cons. The other thing that I'm seeing is that employers are saying to staff, if you want to work overseas, you can do for up to 4 weeks, because after that, then there's tax implications. So, think about it. If your parents live out in France and then during the summer holidays, you want to go and sit in France and work there for 3 weeks. Those are the sorts of things that employers are now thinking outside of the box. What can we do differently to retain our staff? But also, how can we compete if we can't compete on salaries in terms of recruiting staff?
Yeah. And it goes back to your point you said about home working, Bash. Is it home working or is it sitting in Starbucks? Actually, is it remote working? But then that is there, and we're not tax experts here, but people can claim for having a home office, and everybody now, and there's lots of stuff out there about it. But actually, if you're not working from home, you're working elsewhere, that affects that right as well. So there's lots of those little sort of idiosyncrasies that need to be looked at. And again, one size not fitting all.
And every business is different. Actually, Marco, thank you for your point. I am looking at the chat box, by the way. If it's relevant to what we're talking about, I'll mention it now. If not, we'll answer questions at the end. Marco said, maybe you get less done, but often it's a higher quality, working together, bringing up better ideas. Totally agree with you, Marco. That's absolutely the case. And depends on your role, your discipline, what area you're working with in the sector. Totally agree.
I think the other point to mention on that is going into the office is a bit of a novelty, isn't it, at the moment? And then there is that catching up piece that everyone wants to do with each other because they haven't seen each other in person for a while.
Yeah.
So whereas ordinary people worked in the office all the time,
and
so they just said the highs and got on with it. So it's a cultural change as well, isn't it, for everyone to adapt to as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Actually, you just touched on attracting, retaining staff, Amy.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll kick this off. It is, how do we do this? What are candidates looking for? How do we attract them? First of all, how do we retain the best staff? I think from my perspective, as a recruiter, as a recruitment agency, it's looking at absolutely everything. Salaries are really important. Yes, we're not the best paid industry in the world, we know that, but we are at the moment almost in salary wars. We get a good candidate in, and some of them are getting 3, 4, 5, 6 offers within hours of each other. What we don't want to do is be companies fighting against each other, and they end up getting counter offered. We do everything in our power to make sure candidates are not in that position, because they're not just leaving for salaries. So salaries are important, but there's also lots and lots of other different things. There's obviously the benefits are really, really important. Their working environment, the values of the business, how they're going to be developed, the working environment, things like well-being. As those of you that know me know, I'm a huge believer in physical, mental well-being, sustainability, the DEI policies that your company has got, because that's what a lot of candidates, especially the younger ones, are now looking for. It's not just about salary, according to what business you work in, if it's being a tour operator or a TMC. What do you think, guys?
The most important thing is, with your current staff, you have to be engaged with them. You don't shy away from having these conversations as to why you think someone's leaving or thinking of leaving. Have a conversation with them, and just because they've handed in their resignation, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are out of the door. There may be a conversation to have to retain them. And I think we've discussed this before, but it is very much about being an employer of choice. Years ago, it was the employer saying to the employee, right, who's the best fit? What's this employee going to do for me? And now it is about, how are you going to compete in a competitive recruitment market with every other employer to attract and retain the best candidates out there. And so, they will ask you at interview, what's your sustainability policy? What are you doing about equality and diversity? What is they expect this as a given now. It's not something which is a nice bolt on. They expect that as a basically as a good modern employer. And you have to be able to compete on all of those. And it's no point giving it lip service, because candidates are very savvy. They're very clever these days. And you know, if you say, oh yeah, we're an equal opportunities employer, and they pull up your website and see your team profile, and every team member looks the same age, the same colour, you know, it sort of undermines what your equality and diversity policy is trying to say. So don't just give lip service to it. You've got to be able to show it, because staff will do their due diligence behind the scenes.
I completely agree. I mean, I've spoken well before the pandemic for many years around the need to grow and develop employer brand, your brand as an employer, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. And you know, you think about it from your marketing perspective. You know, if you're a B2C company or B2B, you spend a lot of money on your brand, putting it out there as what, you know, one that people want to do business with. And this is exactly the same as people wanted to come and work for you. So what is it that makes you stand out? And you know, these days, because of social media, because of people like, you know, Work Advisor and Glassdoor, you know, people talk, people put stuff out there, and you need to be on top of that, and you need to be welcoming. And you're quite right, Amy, you know, you need to live by example. There's no, as you say, no point in saying we embrace diversity and equity and inclusion, and as you say, put out pictures on you know, on social media, and everybody looks the same. That's not what it is. And you know, we see this in the young people coming through. You know, I spend so much time going out to universities and colleges, bringing industry with me. We're talking about it, and I have to make sure that the people that they are seeing on stage talking about their careers reflect the people in the audience, because people need to see people who look like them, so they can see themselves in your business.
The thing is as well, a lot of employers are like, well, do you know what, we're just getting back on our feet, we haven't got deep pockets to implement all of these. But a lot of them don't cost a lot of money. And you know, let's just take diversity and inclusion as one example. Okay, you can't tackle that subject quickly because there is so many elements of it. So just deal with one small element of it at a time. And you know, those of you that follow Travel Talks Menopause, you know, there's a big initiative regarding menopause at work policies. Now, you might think, and I've had this before, where employers are like, well, we don't really have women of menopausal age. No, you don't yet, but women will become of menopausal age. So if you want to retain those staff, but also, you know, there might be women out there who are going through it and have left their employer, and they're thinking, do you know what, actually, this employer advocates support for women going through the menopause at work. Actually, yeah, I want to go and work for them. So it's little things like that that you can be doing that can set you apart from your competitors.
It won't cost any more, but won't eat into your cash or anything like that. It's just having that understanding, isn't it?
Yeah,
completely. And you're quite right. I mean, taking it differently, but you know, that there's such an opportunity. You know, I think at the moment companies, because they've obviously, you know, given the last 24 months have lost staff, and then now and they're losing staff. So for them, it's about getting experienced staff back in. But they fail, I think, sometimes to understand that there's some easy wins in that. And just by getting people that have always, the type of skills that have always worked there, you're not helping move the business forward at all. So, you know, there are many organizations and also dealing with your local colleges and stuff like that, you know, and looking at the apprenticeship schemes. There are all these things that can help them get staff in. So take, for instance, women, you know, there's organizations like Women in Travel who deal with underrepresented women, people, you know, women who actually have fallen on hard times and desperately want to get back into the workplace. You know, and a lot of them have got skills and that you can easily bring in. You know, we talk about apprenticeships, and everyone immediately thinks 16-year-olds, you know, straight from school. No, you know, you can get really good people with a lot of work, you know, a lot of work experience who want to transition into another area, and you put them in on a more senior apprenticeship. So there's all these opportunities that employers and also there's funding for that. That's even better. You know, you can actually get funding to help you with that. So there's so many ways of actually diversifying your recruitment and the type of people you bring in. And it's so important.
And of course that will open up the pool of candidates that we're all fishing from, because if they're not there, we're not going to find them as company leaders. A couple of very interesting comments and points actually on the chat. Let's have a look. Mel, I think we need to give people a reason to being in the office to attract them. You're happy to discuss. And I think Marco has agreed to that. Mel, totally agree. Not everything can be done remotely, but you've got to make sure staff understand why they have been asked to go back. even if just once a week. Transparency is the rule of the game.
Yeah, 100%. It's always about communication. It always will be, and how you communicate with them. Yeah,
it's quite interesting though, isn't it? How I think we need to give people a reason to be being in the office, absolutely. But it goes back to Mel, to what we're saying is having start having the flexibility and having that sort of that pull of having a good, it's not just about having beers in the afternoon, it's just about having great career development, training, etc. So it is having a balance. I do agree.
I was dealing with a client in non-travel actually, but very similar to this, and they were having an issue around getting people to come to the office, and so they were looking for reasons, and one was things like team building exercises, others were company development days, updates and things like that, but another one was visibility. And and actually a lot of people, particularly, they want to be seen by the senior team, they want to be seen there, and so especially if you're new. So again, there's just that whole, well, okay, when do you want people to be there? Well, make sure your senior team are there that day, and maybe it's take them out to lunch, introduce themselves, you're a new member of staff, and little simple things that we kind of probably did anyway, but we maybe forgotten about.
Yeah, you don't just document. It's not official. You don't document it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think there was some random statistic I saw at the beginning of COVID that was along the lines of that people who are more visible and in the office, and therefore effectively under their managers' noses, are more likely to get promoted, because you can be doing a great job from home, but unless you're there, making that rapport and that relationship, which is easy to do in person, you might be held back a little bit. So remote working has definitely got its benefits, but with that, as with anything, there are some downsides to it.
And there's the trust side as well, isn't it, as employers? Vicky's got a question. Hi, Vicky. How can companies really demonstrate their culture during the interview process with the hybrid model when the office is often only a third or half populated? I think it goes back to your point there, Claire, wasn't it?
Yeah, and actually, even before this all happened, I've always been an advocate for actually, as part of the interview process, having them have someone that they would be working with and not the interviewer, showing them around, having an opportunity to talk to them, because you'll get much more of a sense of the business from the person who's not trying to recruit you. And so that's one way of doing it. And of course, a part of the, and this is a big thing, and you'll know this Basha, where with recruitment businesses doing it, is things like interviews, this interviewing your existing staff, because you know what? Anyone who's worked for you, has ever worked for you, are ambassadors for your business. And so they're the ones you want, what they're going to tell people what it really is like to be there. So I'm sure we'll cover a bit more about what that means, but yeah.
And Marco, again, he's been lots of points on Marco today. Claire agrees with you. Networking so much better in person. We all know that. It's not just being with your teams better, being with your partners, your business partners, your clients, your suppliers. It is absolutely so much better. Things
we love that as an industry. That's the lifeblood of our industry, isn't it? That's the whole point why we love working here. It's being absolutely. The relationships we form.
Absolutely. Sharon McBride, to everybody, just regarding, this isn't purely about menopause today, don't worry guys, but we obviously had to touch on it, but launching a menopause policy was the first time that people thanked me for introducing policy. So we'll let the ladies and the guys at Travel Talks Menopause know that, which is fantastic. I think we've covered everything. Annie Harper, completely agree, and we are starting to work on our employee value proposition to attract and retain.
Good.
So actually, one other thing, we had one question which was sent to us before we launched the session. People are moving for money, mostly some. Hang on, where's the question? Oh, no, that was my answer. We're really struggling. I won't say who it's from. We're really struggling to recruit experienced business travel consultants. Wondered if we're missing any benefits that others are offering to keep their staff or entice new staff. Now we're talking about attracting. We're already offering full-time home working along with pension, life cover, holiday loyalty. Wow. However, there are other benefits. Are there other benefits you're aware that candidates are requesting when applying for positions, or are people just moving jobs frequently just now? In the business travel sector, there's a lot of roles at the moment, and people are and they've just literally only come about probably for the last 6 to 8 weeks. So people are being flattered and almost blinded by salaries. People are moving more for cash. People are moving more for money. Depending on what location you are in the south and the north, there's some really big salaries coming in for business travel consultants. I don't think it's the wise thing to do just to put money up. However, if you are lower than what the average salary is for a BTC, myself or my team will let you know. You're slightly out, you're slightly lower or higher. It's not for us to tell you what to do, but all we can do is inform you what the average is and what other, not mentioning names, what other companies are doing, and then up to you guys as a business whether you want to increase and so on. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge at the moment, but we are finding it quite a lot. But in regards to other benefits, they're the main benefits really. People are asking for healthcare. People are asking for cultures that we've touched it already, things like wellbeing, sustainability, DEI. The younger candidates are looking for those kind of values. But Claire, any of the clients that you work with, are there any other benefits that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on a lot of them through already in our conversation. I think we talk about mental health, we talk about physical health. Financial health is another thing for a lot of young people, actually, is giving them the opportunity to have help with their financial portfolio almost as they go through, and how they, for a lot of people coming into the workplace, we've all been there, how do I actually make the most of my salary? And if you are starting out and you're not earning big salaries. So I think that's one thing that is I think a hidden stress in the workplace, is where people are struggling financially, and a lot of people are struggling financially still as we come out of this, and it'll be time off. So I think there's help around that, and that doesn't have to cost you the earth. Independent financial advisors 9 times out of 10 won't charge you. What they'll do is, obviously, if they but sell you something, then they'll get a fee from whoever they sell that to. So that's one of them. Amy spoke about the the childcare issues, and I think that's around the flexible the flexible working side of it. So again, it may be that, we talked about the 4-day working week, but actually, if you have a parent who actually says, I really want to work for you 5 days a week, but I can't work for you before 10 o'clock or after 3:30. Now, if you as a company adopt that, you're going to have a really, really good, loyal member of staff working for you. And it's been proved for years and years and years that works well. So a lot of people, it's just, I think we've finally got out of that mentality of you've got to be seen at your desk at 9 a.m. and you've got to be logging off at 5:36. Otherwise, you haven't worked. It's a load of rubbish, and the last 2 years have proved that. So I do think that that's a large part of what they're looking for. But I have to say, I agree with you, Basha. I think it's a massive challenge around the salaries, because we need to get better at the salaries that we pay. We have to compete, and we're in a very much more competitive world than we ever were. But it shouldn't be the reason that people jump ship. But then if they do jump ship, you can't match the salary. What do you do? But in my note, I think you'll often find that people go away, the grass isn't as green as they think it is.
No, and in addition to that, I think you're right. There's only so much you can compete on salaries and benefits. And so what I've seen some employers adopt, because I think wellbeing was pretty much on the agenda, or was heading towards the agenda even before COVID. So I've seen some employers adopt a wellbeing day. So you take a day off to basically, how much is that going to cost your business in the overall grand scheme of things? Not a lot. It's going to be less than it's going to cost to recruit someone else and onboard them. Some employees, take your day off, you'll never have to work on your birthday again. It's a small thing, but for some people that might mean a lot.
Yeah, it's not actually putting cash in, it's just, great ideas.
Yeah, salary sacrifice, whereby, you might have deduct a bit of the salary and have a cycle to work scheme, for example. Some employees might be interested in that. Others might be more interested in causes that really matter to them. So you can deduct a bit of salary and donate it to a charity. And I think if I'm right, there are tax benefits to doing that as well.
There are.
Speak to your staff and ask them what matters to them. You won't be able to deliver everything, but if your staff feel like they're being listened to and you can adopt 1 or 2 of them, and that's going to go some way towards your retention, isn't it?
I agree. I was just going to very quickly add on to that, though, just on that thing about charities. A lot of big businesses, and they were doing this pre-COVID, offer between 2 and 5 volunteer days a year, where people can take the day off, fully paid, and go and work for a charity of their choice, be it fundraising, be it working in a soup kitchen or a crisis shelter or whatever, you know, and that ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of people.
It does. And I think in addition to that, some employers are even adopting corporate social responsibility days, where they basically close the office for a day. They all go, I don't know whether it's working in a food bank or doing, you know, helping a charity, you know, do up their garden or workspace or whatever it is. And it ticks a few boxes, doesn't it? Because it's the social responsibility bit, it's the team bonding bit, it's everyone getting together.
The giving back. Yeah. We do that actually at C&M. I don't know if I've got any of the team here, but I don't know if you know, we one day a quarter, take a day off, go and do something. It doesn't have to be for our charity that we work with. It can be giving something back to, like you say, work in a food bank, go and work in a care home or something. And it does, you're right, it ticks lots of boxes.
And I think it's important to remember that, you know, money is important to most people who come to work, but it's not the driver for everybody. Subject to where you are in life and where you are in your career.
Yeah, exactly. Things like pensions aren't necessarily that key to the 20, maybe even 30-year-olds. I think once you get to 40 and 50s, it is absolutely key. I know that healthcare, again, it's a cost to the business. That's one thing I didn't stop during the pandemic, and I'm very glad I didn't. We use a company called Vitality, and it ticks lots of other boxes on the well-being front too. We also use a company called Peninsula for mental health, anything like that. So if any of the guys need counselling, be it for financial, personal issues, or anything that's going on in their life, it's totally anonymous. They can obviously speak to somebody away from the business, but it's something that it's not a lot. It's a negligible fee that we pay for them. I think you know companies that work with Peninsula, do you, Claire?
Yeah, Peninsula. I mean, there are lots like that out there. I mean, even Vitality and things like that will offer counselling opportunities. Really, I mean, I think, and one other point, I'm just going to, this isn't a plug, but you know, the opportunity particularly for your junior staff from a developmental perspective, is to allow them the opportunity to do things like go out to their local schools and colleges and talk to them about their jobs. So you're actually hitting twice there. So you're introducing your business as a local employer. You're actually then telling those young people about the opportunities, and they're seeing a young person in front of them, which goes back to what I was saying about looking like me and being like me. So they get a real sense of that. And actually from a developmental perspective of presentation skills and you know, confidence building and all that sort of stuff, then it's a fantastic opportunity for your more junior staff to get out there and actually goes back to what I was saying, promote your business locally.
One other thing I want to add to this as well, we've talked about junior staff, talking about attracting people, and you've talked about where more mature candidates, Claire, that they might be apprentices, but they're not, you know, they could be in their 40s or 50s or even older. We can't be ageist in what we do. Flexible working, job shares. You know, I've got a lot of not even returning mothers. The children are now at sort of teenage years, and they do job, and it absolutely works, offering that sort of that flexibility. Obviously, you have to be able to have experienced, qualified and people that you trust, but it does work, and of course it ticks lots of boxes as well.
Yeah, can I just interject as well? I mean, we're going to talk about legal changes, but on the horizon there is talk.
That leads me nicely on, actually, Amy.
There you go. So in terms of legal changes that are being talked about, mooted about or discussed, is the right to switch off. Now, that is a legal right in some European countries already. Okay, if you want to be an employer of choice and you want to stand out compared to competitors, why wait for the law to change? Why don't you just implement that already and say, you know, we will not be contacting you outside of work hours? Because, you know, there will be people out there who are burnt out, having worked hard, really hard over the last few years when their colleagues were on furlough, and something like that might be really attractive and appealing to them. The other thing that may potentially change is, at the moment, the right to request to work flexibly only kicks in once you've got 26 weeks service with your employer. It's not an automatic day one right. but there is talk of the government changing that to become a day one right. So, you know, most policies, I would imagine, that employers have, if they've got flexible working policies, will say after 6 months worth of service, you can request to work flexibly. But again, why don't you be ahead of the curve and say that you can ask for that from day one? And you'll see that there, you know, a lot of job adverts will say, you know, nothing's off the table here, whether you want to work remotely, hybrid, or a combination. Ask and we'll see if we can grant it. So those are the two things that may happen this year. Certainly it's happened elsewhere within other European countries. But the other thing, legal changes to be aware of, every April, national minimum wage goes up. Now, I know that a lot of the industry do pay them a national minimum wage, and that will be increased to £9.50 for those over 23 plus, which is the national living wage. The statutory, you know, maternity pay, all of those go up in April, so they will add on a little bit to the cost of employing staff. And it's also just very worthwhile quickly touching on the temporary measures that were introduced in relation to statutory sick pay and COVID have now pretty much gone. So you now can only get SSP if you are actually ill or incapable of working, whereas before it was deemed incapacity, and the waiting days have gone back up to pre-COVID. So it's after 4 days that SSP kicks in. Claire, I think that's a whistle-stop tour of changes. I don't know if there's anything else that you
the only other thing I would do is the right to work checks. Traditionally, people, all our should be aware that particularly if they are European or from elsewhere in the world, that you have to have the correct right to work, and the check has. And traditionally also, you know, that first day in the office, you bring your passport or your driving license, they take a photocopy and off you go. Ticks boxes. That doesn't sit anymore. So actually, as of next week, everything goes online, and the right to work for any new member of staff has to be checked for any new member of staff, be they from the UK or overseas, and that was all done online, so that the government have got a correct record of who is working in your business and they are allowed to work there. So a lot of people, I don't think, have picked up on that because it hasn't been widely reported. But there's a lot of information out there. The HR people should know about that. But yeah, I think just for business owners who don't really have an HR team, you just need to be aware that you're going to need to register and go through these checks online in the government links to prove that all of your employees are legally employed.
Okay. Actually, leads us nicely into a question that was also submitted. What mechanisms exist now? We are post-Brexit to send UK staff to work summer seasons overseas.
Yeah, post-Brexit, obviously the free movement of labour went, and so therefore, if you want to send staff to work in an overseas country, sorry, in a European country, they have to have the right to work there, which means you have to comply with local requirements, which means you need to get local advice. And I would say get that way in advance, because we don't know what the time lag is in terms of getting visas and whatnot, and just because they do one thing in France doesn't mean necessarily it'll be the same thing that they do in Italy. So I think the key is to do research and get local advice as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and SBIT, as the Association Seasonal Businesses in Tourism, I think I've got that right, they've been doing an awful lot of work behind the scenes in working to try and smooth that process as much as possible. So for instance, I believe it is France now that they have an online visa application form, but actually you know, as you rightly say, that's France, and it's not necessarily Italy or Spain or where else. So yeah, you need to get working on that sooner rather than later, and also check the implications. And this goes back almost to what we were saying about remote working as well, because I've certainly got a couple of clients who have European people working for them that have the right to work in the UK, they're on the right visas, but have gone back to, you know, wherever it is, be it, I don't know, France or Poland or whatever, during the lockdown, and they're now saying, well, actually, could I continue to work from here? And in a lot of cases, they can't.
No, and that brings up a whole host of different considerations.
Yeah.
Tax, for example, you know, where are they ordinarily working from? And should they then start paying tax, for example, in France? It also brings up jurisdictional issues, because which law is their employment subject to? Is it France or is it England? And then it brings up contractual. So there's a lot to think about. So it's not as easy just to say, yeah, that's fine, go and work, carry on working from an overseas territory.
Yeah, very quickly, just looking at the link, someone's asked for the link. I'm just going to put the Gov website up. I think that's the right one. That's for your link. The question about existing staff, I actually was on last week, had a long conversation with an HR colleague in the industry about this, and they found out that you don't need to do it. So, I mean, it was quite difficult to find. So if you have the right things in place already, then don't worry about it. But it might be worth, particularly those who maybe are on, you know, a European or you know, foreign by birth and don't have British passports, just to get them registered on the site anyway. Probably just
that's
best
right.
practice.
Just, can you imagine the administrative burden it would be to get all your existing staff for all employees?
Yeah.
It would just be a nightmare, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Mindful, doesn't it? Okay, lovely. Anybody got any more questions, please put them on the chat. We'll get you to video yourself. We can get your faces on screen soon. Moving on to the last part of the session, predictions for 2022 and 2023. I'll probably give a bit of a recruitment update, shall I? It's probably time for me to do that. Well, where are we? As I said when I started, I've never known it so busy. I've got less headcount, but it's probably the busiest time in travel recruitment I've ever known as a business. We've got more travel vacancies this March, so March, last day tomorrow, isn't it? March 2022, than at any point in the last 10 years in a month, which is incredible. March 2022's total number of new jobs is more than twice as high as the pre-pandemic months, which is incredible. It's a large month for placements as well. We made more placements in March than we have since 2012 in a month, which is, my guys are very busy. Yeah, very busy. But we are still struggling for candidates. We just don't have, the vacancies are up there. The candidates are down there, which a lot of our partners are here. My guys are working their little socks off, sourcing. We're doing everything in our power. We're using new advertising forums. We're using new job boards. We've got more LinkedIn recruiter licenses. We're looking outside the box. We're doing our absolute best, but we know we need to be doing more to educate that the industry is to, if they're not there, we can't find them. We need to be broad in what we're looking at. Came up with some ideas yesterday. Actually, I was at the ATO event. I'll be speaking to TTG about, and Claire and Amy, about some other initiatives and what else we can do to attract more talent into the industry. More news about that later, hopefully in the next few weeks. So really busy on the vacancy and the placement front. Candidates, March looking like a very strong month for registrations, which is great. More registrations at any point since last year. Fantastic news for you guys, for you employers out there, but we still need to be doing more, as I keep saying. The number of new travel candidates is definitely not rising at the same pace as vacancies. It's just not. There's a huge disparity. So that's where we are now. I see this continuing for at least 18 months, really, to 2 years. Definitely to this time next year, and then we'll see. We just need to be creative. We need to broaden what we're looking at. We need to broaden our requirements. It's not the same job, the same candidate. If they're not there, we can't find them. Yeah, they're not there. We can't magic them out of thin air. You employers that put your adverts on LinkedIn, you know, you get a lot of interest, but they're just not the right people. They're just not the right people, which is a challenge. So that's kind of from my recruitment perspective. I see it continuing. I see the vacancy still happening, but we need to be as creative and working in collaboration with you all to get the best talent, to retain it and to attract it as well. Ladies, what do you think?
Well, I think that this phenomenon of the Great Resignation is not just unique to the travel industry. You know, I was reading a statistic today that 40% of the working population across the world will be thinking or contemplating moving jobs in the next 12 months. So it's wider than the travel industry. but that means that candidates who would ordinarily look at the travel industry will be looking at vacancies elsewhere as well. So there's that extra competition. But I think don't lose sight of, it's not all about recruitment, it's about retaining your staff. You know, it's like, we lose sight of this, isn't it? It's a bit like going to find the next piece of business. Well, look after your existing clients because they might not be there as well.
Absolutely.
So it's a double-pronged approach.
Some companies might say, oh, you don't care if we've got, you want us to have bad retention. I'm like, absolutely not. We don't want to place a candidate with a company that's got high turnover, because what sort of morale, what sort of culture, you know, we want to be working with companies that have got great retention, great cultures and so on. Actually, let's ask the question. We do have another poll, which I am going to.
Yeah, and while you do that, I'll just add my 10 pence worth in, which is that I think with the Great Resignation comes opportunity. So you need to start thinking about how you can future-proof your business. God forbid we go through another pandemic, but actually, so we're not going through this sort of crisis of attracting new talent to the sector. But think outside the box. You know, we mentioned, you know, about apprenticeships. We mentioned about schemes like Women in Travel Run. You know, I talk a lot about getting out there and working with industry, and we need to be thinking right now how we create our future pipelines as well, so that in 18 months, you know, as we get through this, we actually have got young people in. I think we also need to accept that you know, people do leave businesses as long as it's for the right reasons. And we spoke, you know, I mentioned earlier about, you know, anyone who's ever worked for your business is an ambassador for your business. And what you want is people going out, and it may be that their situations change. They may love your business, but they're making a change now because they want less hours or less stress or whatever it is. But when someone says, oh, you used to work for so and so, they go, brilliant business to work for. Yeah, I wouldn't hesitate recommending them as an employer. And that's also the sorts of things we need to be thinking about as we go out there. It's really, you know, I think the travel industry still is one industry that people see as a sexy, fun industry. We've always had an issue with, I think, banging the drum about what a great place it is, but you know, through things like, I mean, obviously, please you know, talk to me about the work I do with colleges and universities. But actually, there's so much we could be doing to promote ourselves. But as you say, Basha, it's got to be done together, and we need to be, you know, really collaborating as an industry. So we're, you know, we want to attract all the right people. Once they're in, we can fight out, we can fight over each other. But you know, we just want to get them wanting to work for us. And my final point would be, just if I was a betting person, I genuinely do believe, and I won't say what percentage, but people who have left the industry might actually return, but not quite yet. I think they're going to wait and see, is this really over? Are we really through the worst? Are we, you know, and am I ready to take that risk again and go back into the sector that I love?
I agree. I agree with people are going to come back. While we were all talking, I did launch the poll. Are you currently struggling to retain staff? And there's results. 73%, it's actually the opposite, 73% no and 28% yes, which is very encouraging, I think. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's good.
They're doing something right, aren't they? So
Say that again, Amy.
I said they're certainly doing something right.
Which is great.
There's always more that we can do, you know, because it's
but there's still a quarter that aren't, you know, that's quite a big number. Let's have a look at some of the questions. Unfortunately, some people had to leave us, but as we said, we're recording, the whole session would be sent out. Can you speak about onboarding and offboarding? Yeah. How to do it right, and the importance of employer brand? Claire,
absolutely.
I'll touch on this from a legal point of view, Claire, and then if you want to add in afterwards, then that would be good. In terms of onboarding, we know there's going to be a lot of movement. Okay, so what can you do? Make sure that the contract is fit for purpose. Don't just use the last one that you had when the last person joined a few years ago. Make sure, you know, if there is going to be continuing movement within the industry and the wider working world, that they've got the restricted covenants in place. So if they do come and join you and use that as a springboard to go somewhere else, then your business is protected. The other thing to think about is, you know, pre-COVID, I probably can count on one hand the amount of employers that had in their contracts the right to put staff on short-term working or lay them off. Okay, that is another thing that you might want to build into your contracts. we think COVID is on its way out, but we don't know what happens if this happens again and the government don't introduce a furlough scheme. At least you've got that protection. So protect your business from an onboarding point of view in terms of the legal things that you need to put into place into the contract. But if staff are going to leave, and ultimately sometimes there's nothing that you can do to stop staff leaving, make sure that your business is protected. Make sure that you've got the protections in the contract in terms of restrictive covenants, because that will restrict where they can go and work and who they can go and work for and when they can go and work for those competitors. Also think about confidential information, so things like your data, your customer database, you know, all of that needs to be protected, because the last thing that you want to do is for them to pick it up, walk out and set up in competition. So think about how you can protect that in your contract as well. And I think aside from that, it's really important for businesses to identify who their key people are. What would it mean to the business? Don't think about this when someone's handed in their resignation. Think about it, be proactive. Identify who they are and what the plan B would be if that situation arose. And so be forward thinking about that, because there is going to be movement and it's been proactive.
Yeah. I would add that's all absolutely right. I think I would add maybe from the employer branding point of view, when it comes to onboarding staff, I do think sometimes people miss a trick. So you spend a lot of money, or you have an interview, you sell the culture in, and then you say, right, they hand their notice in, and a month later they're going to come and join you. So they might not speak to you from the day that you have the interview until the day they walk into the office. And I think that is a real waste of an opportunity. And I think more and more companies, particularly in the tech space, are doing this. I've seen this with some of my tech providers, is that they keep in touch with them. We're really excited that you're joining them. A lot of people might have, on their first day, might have arranged for a work buddy for that first week. But actually that work buddy gets in touch with them, and often even just a little video saying, hi, just so you know who I am when you walk in, this is me, really looking forward to seeing you next week. As soon as you get in, come and do this, come and do that, and it's things like, what to do when people still get nervous about what's that first day, even if it's the 10th job you've been in. It's like, what should I wear, who should I talk to, what do they do for lunch, and all this sort of stuff. So it's just having those sort of, that even before they get, so they know before they join what to expect, and that says an awful lot about you as an employer. So I think there's that. Obviously the induction program, a lot of people have got different things, and that's business by business, but it's that main thing, start off with a great opportunity, but then don't let it stop, keep on with that, those opportunities, and a lot of that's down to communication. But actually the same is to be said for offboarding as well. So the moment they leave, don't go, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want the staff to know they're leaving. Actually, it's like, we're really going to miss you, we're really sorry you're leaving. And I mean, obviously it depends slightly on the reason they leave, but if it was just a resignation, we're really going to miss you, we're going to, and have that kind of that process whereby they feel valued right up until their last day. And the other thing I would say, and I do this with a lot of my clients, is doing exit interviews. So actually doing interviews with them at the end of their time, when they actually are more likely to be quite, hopefully constructive, to tell you about what you do right and what you do wrong, and what they think you could do. And hopefully that means they walk away going, do you know what, that was a great, my last few weeks were really great, I'm going to miss them.
And they'll then pass on, that actually this is a good company to work for, and they'll pass it on to potential future staff for us.
Well, in addition, and also, they might go to this new job and it might not work out.
Exactly.
Or in a few years' time, they might think, do you know what, actually, the grass wasn't as green, and maybe, my last employer, but how you treat them in that departure phase is really important, because it might leave a good taste in the mouth, or it might leave a bad taste in the mouth.
Absolutely. I think it shows during the pandemic, when we had to make those very unfortunate redundancies, etc. Horrible situation to be in as an owner or a leader of a business. But it's how you do that that's absolutely key. And I know many companies, including myself, some of the redundancies I did have to make, if you do it right, I cried when I make people redundant. Don't tell my guys that, it's not to their faces, but it's a horrible situation to be. It's horrible. But if you do it the right way, professional, and they know the reasons why, two of my guys have come back. And I'm sure many people out there that's been the case as well. So it's about doing the right thing the right way.
Yeah.
We have another question from Sharon McBride. Won't short time working layoffs in contracts have a negative impact on EVP, employee value proposition, for those of you that don't know that? Claire, probably are you?
Well, that's actually Amy I was going to look at. I think, Amy, you answer that first.
Well, I obviously come at things from a lawyer's point of view,
Yeah.
as to how to protect the business. So there's a lot of things in contracts that won't always sit nicely with your employee, with your EVP. But that's not to say that you shouldn't put them in, because it's that balancing act between protecting your business and your EVP. So it's, where do you draw that line? Similarly, say with restrictive covenants, you might get employees saying, well, I'm not signing up to these. But you need to protect your business. So it's a fine line, and it's a balancing act, I would say.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add, actually, as I do believe that irrespective of the industry you walk in, we're going to see more and more of these clauses in contracts anyway. So it's people are going to see it more and more and more, and they're just gonna there'll be that acceptance. And you're right, Abby, not every clause in the contract is what you want, but that's unfortunate is the situation it is, and hopefully most of the people will understand the reason why it's in there, and that it's only in there as a last resort, because there's laws around that as well, and how long that lasts, minimum payments, exactly, yeah, and all that sort of stuff. So it's not just next week we decided you're not going to come and work for a week because we need to save a bit of cash. It doesn't happen that way.
It's one small thing in terms of the overall package that has to be sold to that person as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I think that leads us almost on to the end. Guys, you're more than welcome to put your videos on, take your videos back on, and if anybody wants to add anything or would like to ask an actual question face to face rather than the chat room, please feel free to do so. Would anybody? Oh, here we go. We've got a message down here. Let's have a little look. Oh, it's not a message, it's just a session. That's good to know. Actually, one other good thing. I know you two. Oh, here we go. We can see your lovely faces. Hi. Please put so we can see everybody, so we know we're not just talking to blank screens. These employee engagement surveys, we touched on that. Oh, look, thank you, everybody. Nice to see your faces. They're really, really important, aren't they, Claire? We talked about onboarding, offboarding, exit interviews, and you can do them anonymously as well. They really, really work. And I know it's great to get feedback. And when we do our PDRs, performance development reviews for our guys, 360 reviews also work really well. How do they feel about their colleagues? How do they feel about you? And that is also really powerful to get a very, very constructive, objective way of changing things.
Yeah. And I would say now, particularly we're in this hybrid world, you don't, when you are together 5 days a week, you can pick up on things, and you don't pick up on things necessarily. You certainly don't, it's not as easy to read on screen. So these are a really good way of just having that litmus test about how people are feeling. And I've been doing them with various clients as we come out of it. People have started to come back to the office. How many of you want to come back to the office? How many of you are still a bit nervous? How many of you feel that you need some more information, or you need assurances that we've got wipes on every station and hand sanitizers, and the kitchen's going to be safe, and all that sort of stuff. So it's just they are very, very useful tools, and I believe that that anonymous is a good thing as well, because I think it just means that people will be much more open with you, and it's not going to be this is wonderful, 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 but it gives you something to work on, which is so important.
You just have to be careful on that. We used to have, I can't remember the name of the company, we used to use a company just for constant, it wasn't We Thrive, but it was almost for monthly suggestion boxes, and they were all anonymous, but it ended up being a moan fest. And I knew the people that were moaning because it was the same old moans, so we actually stopped it. But I think there has to be a good balance there, really, don't there?
Yeah, you're right. There's so many tools that you can do that with. I mean, I've just tend to use SurveyMonkey, which is free and everything else, and I get we try and balance it so that it's a yes no, a bit like the polls on here, but also opportunity for people to put in constructive suggestions. But people are having a moan. Why, if it's the same thing, you have to think, why are they constantly moaning about this? What does that actually saying to you?
Yeah, is it something you have to change in your business?
Yeah,
or do you have to change that person?
Yeah, exactly.
That might happen as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that any ladies and gentlemen out there want to unmute, want to say anything, comment, ask a question, while we've got these two professional experts in front of us that have got they've got a wealth of information and knowledge? No?
Yes, please. Our business leaders are looking more at using contractors from overseas. And we've got quite a few requests now for doing this. And I just want to understand the legal situation for this myself.
Contractors overseas to work in the UK?
No, to work overseas and mainly in IT, to do IT work for us, but based in European countries or
it's outsourcing to.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I can jump in straight away with that, which is you need to think about tax implications. You need to think about jurisdictional issues as well as to which laws govern that contract of employment. But aside to that, the one thing I always say is, are they actually contractors? Or are we using this label of self-employed, freelance, consultants, whatever you call it, and in reality, they are going to be your employees and your workers. There's been a lot of case law that's coming out, you know, Uber last year, Plimlico plumbers, where in fact they are your employees or they are your workers, so they are entitled to holiday pay. They are, you know, I am assuming that these contractors will be paid in advance, in excess of the national minimum wage. So there's a lot to think about. We had the Taylor Review many years ago, pre-COVID, which was going to legislate in this area, but that got on the back burner because of COVID and various other things that have happened in the world since. It is a bit of a messy area, so all I would say is
I'm struggling a bit with it, if I'm honest.
It's not always about what's written down on a piece of paper. They will look at the reality of what's happening in practice. And the other added complication is as well that the way HMRC will look at it will not necessarily always be the same way that an employment tribunal or a court will look at it.
Yeah, I think, you know, my recommendation would be that your first thing is to find out with HMRC what the tax implications are going to be and how you work out whether or not, as Amy said, they are officially a worker. And that applies, you know, whether they're from in the UK as well. I mean, a lot of companies are hiring in contractors to fill gaps at the moment. I'm a contractor to my businesses, but I am absolutely genuinely self-employed because I have many businesses I work for. But if I work for one person all the time and claimed it, I in effect am a worker, so I will come under the new regulations that you probably heard around IR35, which is all to do.
Which brings us to Karen. Hi, Karen has asked if they're in Europe though, does IR35 apply?
IR35. Go on, Claire, what are you going to...
No, I was looking at you, actually. I mean, you can answer that one.
IR35 is a UK regime. So they will have similar or something slightly different. And that's why you've got to make sure that you're not falling foul of one particular jurisdiction's law and trying to satisfy the English equivalent, because until you actually work out which jurisdiction these individuals fall under, you won't know which regime to apply with.
And you could end up paying tax twice because you could
think that you're doing the right thing in this country before foul of, you know, a European country, for example. And you know, this is a textbook exam question here, Sharon, that you've asked, because it goes off in so many different directions. So simply looking at jurisdiction, for example, in this country, we look at what close enough connection is there back to England, for example. I would say get the best contract that you can put in place. Take tax advice and take legal advice on it. And your tax advice and your legal advice may not necessarily be on the same page. So it's doing a risk assessment. So it can be done, but there are a few T's that need to be crossed and a few I's that need to be dotted.
Basically check whichever jurisdiction, whichever region you're in. Interestingly enough, we're getting a lot more requests for contractors, UK temps we call them. They're on our payroll, but they're pretty much self-employed, but we can only replace them being in a business travel environment or even leisure if they're available immediately. We wouldn't take permanent members of staff away from a permanent job and place them in a temp role because there's no it's much more flexible and there's no sort of long-term commitment. So yeah, very interesting. Any other questions before we close, guys? No? Well, thank you so much. I hope everyone would agree that that was a really informative, varied. We covered so many points. Claire and Amy, once again, thank you so much for your input. We couldn't do it without you. You've both, you've got so much information and knowledge that I hope the guys in the audience, I know we've lost some now, but it will be that they'll be able to see the end of it. We'll think that we can hone in on all their expertise, which priceless, really. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody for your time this morning. I know you're all very busy running your businesses, and we hope to see you again very soon. I'm sure we'll do another one probably by the end of the summer. So thanks again. You'll see this written up in TTG, and we'll send you all the recording. If there's anybody within your businesses that you feel might benefit from seeing this session, then we'll send it over to you, probably close of business today or tomorrow. So thanks again, everybody. Appreciate your time, and see many of you very, very soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Basha, for inviting us again.
Oh, my pleasure. Can we stop recording now, Owen, please?